Mom pushed me out on Christmas, and the bus to Grandma's dropped me right into the night that changed everything. Years of illness, grief, and legal fights followed, but the truth, my receipts, and the smallest voices finally set me free. At Christmas dinner, everything sparkled except me. The ham shone with glaze under the kitchen light. The table runner was sprinkled with fake snow that stuck to the sweat of my palms, and the shortbread crumbled like it was trying to disappear. My mom had lit 3 candles that made the house smell like sugar cookies and pine cleaner, and she'd put on soft music so we could pretend things were fine. She watched me with that smile that had teeth in it. "You're a burden. Get out," she said, like she was telling me the weather. The knife clinked in the gravy boat. My stepdad looked down at his plate like the ham had something to tell him. My little sister, Maddie, glanced between us, her eyes big and wet, fork hovering like a white flag. I felt something in my ribs go hollow. I put my napkin on the table. My legs moved before my head did. I went down the hallway that still smelled like my childhood shampoo, grabbed my coat from the hook, and didn't look back at the family photos where my smile always looked a little forced. The door stuck against the cold, then gave. Outside, the air was knifing cold, exhaust hanging in the streetlights. I started walking because that's what you do when everything in you wants to run. My breath made little ghosts. I caught the last bus on Arlington, Route 8 toward Kenmore, because I didn't have a car and because Grandma's porch light had always been my North Star. I sat in the cracked seat and held onto the bar as Christmas lights blurred past, and the bus hummed like a lullaby that didn't know the words. The driver shot me a glance in the mirror. I smiled, and it felt strange on my face. I stepped off near Grandma's street, cheeks burning, and cut across the patchy snow. Her house had always been an anchor, cement steps stained with rust, the storm door that screeched, a wind chime that counted breezes. But the porch light was out, like it had finally gotten tired. Through the front window, blue-white light flickered, too bright, too sterile. My heartbeat crawled up my throat. The door opened before I could knock. A man in navy with a paramedic jacket stood there, his face kind. "You must be Macy," he said, guessing at my name. "Maya," I said, breathless. He stepped aside. "She asked for you. We're taking her to Suma, Akron City. She's awake, but she's been asking for her girl." I went in. The house smelled like dish soap and winter air, and the Christmas tree glowed in the corner. Grandma sat on the couch with an oxygen mask, hair flattened, eyes bright, and scared in a way I'd never seen. She lifted her hand. I took it, and the paramedic adjusted the mask with gloved fingers. "I was coming anyway," I said, and my voice broke. "I was coming to you. Before it broke." I was 20 that winter, a community college student with a bus pass and a backpack full of composition notebooks. I worked mornings at a cafe called the Hazel Bean, pouring espresso shots with trembling hands and memorizing the regulars' orders like they could save me. The world felt big and very small at the same time in Akron. The sidewalks were cracked. The buses were late. But there was a rhythm I understood: classes, shifts, the little returns. Mom's house, though, had a different rhythm that vibrated under the skin like a fever. Diane, my mother, liked control. She liked labels on leftover containers and everything tucked in a bin, including feelings. She'd married Mark when I was in 8th grade, and he paid the mortgage and shuffled around the living room like a neutral ghost, saying, "Ask your mother," to everything from curfews to cable packages. Maddie was 13 and bright. She loved drawing wolves with human eyes and watching skincare videos on mute. She used to climb into bed with me when the house got too quiet and whisper lists of everything she wanted to be: animator, veterinarian, somebody with a passport. Mom had this way of taking what was fragile and setting it too close to the edge. "Don't make me look like the bad guy," she'd say, and I'd nod, because arguing meant hours of syllables thrown like glass. I worked, I brought home groceries sometimes. I paid my heat share even when the math didn't make sense, and somehow it was never enough. "You think you deserve praise for doing the bare minimum?" she'd ask, crossing her arms. "Do you know what I did at your age? Do you have any idea what it's like to carry dead weight?" It wasn't about chores. It was about oxygen, and maybe about her, and maybe about all the could-have-beens that stuck to her like burrs. She'd had me at 19, and sometimes I could feel that number like a third parent in the room, scolding us both. I started visiting Grandma Nora more. Her house was a one-story with siding that needed paint and a ceramic cardinal perched by the kitchen window. She wore floral housecoats, had a drawer full of rubber bands that had outlived their elasticity, and could make a grilled cheese that tasted like somebody finally got you. "Come in, Mouse," she'd say, and I'd roll my eyes at the nickname and feel the knot in my stomach unwind at the corners. She didn't judge me when I pulled off my shoes and admitted I was tired of always proving I belonged in a house I helped keep. She would slice an apple and hand me the bigger half. She'd tell stories about being young in a town that didn't know her yet, about wanting to join the high school chorus, but being too scared to sing in front of people. "You have a say," she'd tell me. "Don't forget that you do. Don't let anyone tell you your say is too loud or too much trouble." She kept a little cash box in the pantry with singles and coins that smelled like pennies. "For the pizza guy, for the meter, for when the machine laughs at your card," she'd explain. It stayed stocked like magic, and I didn't ask how. The week before Christmas, Mom was on edge. Money, always money, the way it talked and didn't talk. She'd signed up for a Christmas hamper from a charity that gave out boxes with canned vegetables and stuffing mix, even though we weren't starving, because it's what smart people do. Mark picked up extra shifts at the plant. He smelled like metal and talk radio when he came home. I'd tucked $50 in cash into the junk drawer for the electric bill, a folded apology, and found it gone with a note from Mom, used for household, thanks. I'd been cutting back on bus rides to save money. I charted my week like a general, planning every trip like it had stakes. I told myself I was resilient when I stuck cardboard into my boot to block the hole. I told myself I was doing fun, scrappy things like making gifts from thrift store mugs and hot cocoa packets. Christmas Day was a pot roast of expectations. Mom kept saying, "We're not going to make a big deal of it this year," then spent 3 days stewing vegetables and wiping counters until her hands were raw. She set the table with the good plates. She said, "Let's be present," and then watched me like being present was a test I was failing. The conversation dissolved into small talk and Mom's jokes at other people's expense. I was careful. Then she said, "It must be nice not having rent. You know what I would give to be your age with no responsibilities." "I pay rent," I said, carefully. "I transfer money into your account every month." "You barely contribute," she said, and her mouth curved into the shape of something that hurt. "You eat here, you shower here, I keep a roof over your head, and I get attitude in return. I've been patient, but you're not a kid. It's time to grow up or get out." Maddie went very still. Mark reached for the salt and realized he already had it in his hand. I looked at the fake snow and thought about all the times I'd made myself small so there'd be more room for her. "What do you want from me?" I asked stupidly because I already knew. She wanted me to stop being a mirror. "You're a burden," she said, soft and deadly. "Get out." It wasn't the first time someone had called me that. It was the first time I believed it might never stop. So I left, and the air punched me in the chest, and I rode the bus to the only person who ever called me Mouse. Pressure builds. Grandma's living room was a snowfall of pill bottles and folded blankets that night, the TV muted, a home video of laughter without sound. The paramedic strapped her to the gurney, and she squeezed my fingers like a metronome. "It's okay," I told her. "I'm here." She rolled her eyes, "Don't baby me," then looked scared again. That buttoning and unbuttoning of composure, how do any of us get good at that? The ambulance slid into the night, and I followed in a taxi the paramedic ordered for me because buses don't care about emergencies. We pulled up to Suma, Akron City's emergency entrance, where the air smelled like salt and bleach and cold coffee. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, and the security guard asked me gently if I had a mask. I pressed the dispenser button like it was a wish. They took her back. I sat in waiting, which is an activity you think you're good at until it's all you can do. The TV above the vending machines chattered about a game. An older man in a hunting jacket slept with his mouth open. An orderly pushed a floor polisher that made circles like halos. A nurse with tired eyes but perfect eyeliner called my name. "She's asking for you," the nurse said. "Nora's a spitfire, huh?" "Sometimes," I said. In the curtained cubicle, Grandma was smaller, like the hospital air was a shrink ray. Her hair, gray turning white, tufted. The oxygen hissed. Her hand was cold, her palms rough, not as rough as they used to be when she worked nights at the factory, but rough enough to remind me of everything she'd built that no one thanked her for. I slipped, she said through the mask. Bathroom rug. Felt my age all at once. Do you feel dizzy? I asked, because I've seen TV medical shows, because asking questions felt like lighting candles. Pride hurt, she said, and I huffed a laugh. Left hip sparking. They want to keep me. Just overnight, they said. The doctor, a woman with gray streaks who could have been a conductor the way she orchestrated the chaos, came in and told us the words. Minor fall. Slight fracture in the greater trochanter. Pain management. Physical therapy referral. Test for underlying issues. It's good you came in, she said. You have people who love you, she added, and that simple sentence made something hot and angry rise in my throat, because it shouldn't be radical to say, and yet. When I texted Mom, she didn't answer. When she finally did, hours later, it was, let me know if we need to get a lawyer. Hospitals love to pad bills. No, how is she? No, are you okay? Just money, that practical God we all had to worship because we didn't have a choice. I threw my phone back into my tote like it had burned me. Grandma was admitted to a room on the 8th floor with a window that looked onto the parking garage. I spent the night in the chair that pretends it's a recliner. A nurse brought me a scratchy blanket and a paper cup of coffee. You look like you could use this, she said. Her name tag said Mary. At 3 a.m., when the machines glowed like a city from a plane, Grandma whispered, what happened at the house? I could lie, but lying to her made me taste metal. Mom told me I'm a burden, I said, the words soft and dense. She turned her head to look at me. The heart monitor beeped steadily. She's been stuck in a story she wrote for herself a long time ago, Grandma said. And you're not the villain of it, no matter how much she wants you to be. Something in me unclenched. Can I stay with you? I asked. I heard how small I sounded. Of course you can. I should have asked sooner, she said, and reached for my hand even though it made the fore tug. The next day, I caught a bus back to my mom's to pack a duffel. The house smelled like last night's dinner and strong coffee and the kind of silence that splits you into echo. Mom was at the table with a pad of paper, making a list. Budget categories in neat columns, neat enough to make my head go hot. I'm moving in with Grandma, I said, standing with the strap of my bag digging into my shoulder. I braced for the fight. She looked up, and for a second, she was my mother from my childhood, the one who had danced with me in the kitchen to Fleetwood Mac, the one who taught me to drive in the empty high school parking lot. Then her mouth hardened. Make sure she's not being taken advantage of, she said. The implication hung between us like a damp shirt. What does that even mean? I asked. My fingers went numb. She's old and gullible. Don't let the neighbors talk her into donations. And don't let your father sniff around, telling you what he thinks of my parenting, she said, as if my dad, who lived in Indiana with a new family and sent texts at 2 in the morning that said, how's my kid, like he wasn't sure I was real, had anything at all to do with this moment. I went to my room. My high school trophies were in a box under my bed. Everything else was either borrowed by Maddie or thrown away during one of Mom's purges. I packed jeans, underwear, my toothpaste, the sweater my ex-boyfriend never asked for back. When I left, Maddie grabbed me in the hallway and hugged me hard. I drew you something, she said, breathless, stuffing a folded paper into my bag. It's dumb, but keep it. I smoothed the paper later that night on Grandma's coffee table. She'd drawn a wolf curled around a tiny mouse in a field of snow. Under it, she'd written, "Mouse has teeth." At Grandma's, it was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the whir of the space heater. She had a hospital bed delivered for the living room, because stairs were out of the question for the next few weeks. Makes me feel 98, she grumbled, then thanked the delivery guys with brownies she'd baked and frozen last month, because she's always 3 steps ahead of everyone's hunger. I settled into the yellow bedroom that smelled like old books and fabric softener. I taped Maddie's drawing to the closet door. I took over the medicine schedule like a general, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, stool softener. She yelled, TMI, and then we both laughed, because if you can't laugh at that, What are you even doing? When Mom called, she wanted to talk about copays and billing codes. Hospitals will charge you for the blankets if you don't ask, she said. Okay, I said, my jaw tight. She's in pain less than yesterday. Information she didn't ask for, thrown like a gift into a ravine. Don't let those physical therapists baby her, she said. She'll milk it. I bit my tongue so hard it bled. I learned a long time ago that some people mistake empathy for weakness, and some people don't know the difference between attention and care. Grandma's recovery was slow measured. The physical therapist, Bree, who wore neon scrubs and called everyone friend, showed her how to move without tearing anything. I learned how to pour water out of the humidifier without spilling it on the wood floor. I started leaving for my morning classes while Grandma watched game shows, and I'd come home with soups and groceries. We fell into our own rhythm that wasn't built on resentment. In February, I met Jesse at the Hazel Bean when he came in twice in the same morning and ordered decaf both times. Don't judge me, he said when I arched an eyebrow. I like feeling like I'm part of a ritual. Rituals are just habits with better PR, I said, and he laughed, and it felt like the sun coming out after a week of snow. He studied fire science at the tech school. He had hands that always had a nick or two, and a way of listening that made me feel not just heard, but held up. He didn't mind when I had to leave a movie early because Grandma had a bathroom situation. He went with me to physical therapy sometimes and carried the walker to the trunk without being asked. My mom came by once with a casserole and a tight smile. She examined the medical bills like they were code to crack. Her eyes drifted to the cookie jar, and she lifted the lid, as if checking for secrets. You holding up? She asked, like it was small talk, like the answer would be a weather report. Yeah, I said. You can always come back home, she said tightly, which was rich considering the way she'd sent me out. She looked around the room. Someone has to make sure no one takes advantage. Old people, she let it trail off, a cheap trick used to make a person fill in the insult themselves. Mom, I said, gently, we're okay. She nodded, and when she left, she said, make sure you save the receipts. It took me a second to realize she meant for reimbursements from Medicare or to argue with billing, but the way she said the word receipts echoed in my head. Proof. The thing that scoops rumor out of a room like dirty water. The line crossed. The next few years, life unspooled in a way that wasn't glamorous, but felt sturdy. I finished my associate's degree with a GPA that made me cry quietly in the bathroom of the registrar's office, because I'd done it. I'd actually done it anyway. I got a job as an office assistant at a pediatric clinic downtown, which paid better than scoring sandwiches and let me feel useful in a way that made the hard days less hollow. Jesse and I moved into a tiny place above a hair salon with a slanted ceiling and a bathroom sink that always dripped no matter what we did. We painted the living room moss green and pretended we weren't terrified of all the things we couldn't control. Grandma's house became a second home for us and for anyone who needed pancakes on a Sunday. She insisted on paying me rent, even when I didn't live there anymore. In case, she'd say, shrugging at the cash she slipped into my coat pocket. And because I'm not going to be the old lady who lets you pay for her cable. We had a baby boy in May of 2019. His name is Owen. He came out with a will, wailing and kicking like he had opinions about fluorescent lighting. He had long eyelashes that made strangers coo, and fingers that kept finding my hair and holding on. Mom held him and cried. You did good, she said, and for a moment, I let myself float in that rare kindness. He learned to say mama and truck and more, and then beat them all out with no. He adored Jesse with a devotion that made my chest feel like it couldn't contain the light. When Owen was 2.5, he got a bruise on his shin from the coffee table that stuck around like it had a lease. I told myself it was nothing. Kids are clumsy. Then came the runny nose that never really left, the low-grade fevers, the way he got winded climbing the couch. I know what you're thinking, how could I not see it? But denial is a soft blanket that makes you think you're warm. And pediatric clinics see colds all the time. You start to believe statistics are lullabies. When he slept longer than usual and woke up fussy, when he wouldn't eat his dinosaur nuggets, when he cried and lacked the tantrum snap, Jesse and I hovered, stomachs rolling with quiet dread. We took him to Akron Children's on a Tuesday. The triage nurse was kind. The resident had hair she kept tucking behind her ear like a nervous tell. They pricked his finger and then drew more blood. Owen screamed the high, thin scream that makes the animal part of your brain want to pick them up and run out of the building with them. He calmed when I sang the ABCs off-key because that's the only tune I had the breath for. The doctor came in with a printout. Her eyes were soft, her mouth tight. She talked about blasts and counts, and she never said the words, and then she did, and then I felt like the floor had shifted. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It is treatable. Most kids respond well. Protocols. Plans. We will take care of him. The words slid like beads. I held on to treatable like a rope. We checked in. They placed a port. They started chemo. I learned the language of rounds and counts and mouth sores and magic mouthwash, of the way steroids can make your kid rocket from giggling to rage in 30 seconds, and then slump, exhausted, in your lap like a sugar-crashed puppy. I learned how to tape plastic to the tub so the bath wouldn't turn into a bacterial free-for-all, how to open a sterile dressing with one hand because the other was busy soothing. The nurses were saints in scrubs who remembered his dinosaur's name and my coffee order. The hematology/oncology floor became an ecosystem we navigated with bleary eyes and a binder that I kept like it contained him. Mom reacted in the one way mom knows. She took a crisis and turned it into a production. "We are going to fight this," she said, as if we were soldiers in a battle she was leading. She wanted to start a fundraiser. At first, I hesitated. It felt weird to ask strangers to pay for my kid. But the bills piled, and even with insurance, the nickel and dime costs were like a tide that crept up your legs. Gas. Parking. Takeout when you're too tired to cook. The babysitter for the times you can't bring your kids' toddler buddies to the hospital. The lost wages, because the fever always seems to come on your shift. We made a fundraising page. I wrote a careful summary. I put up a picture of Owen holding his stuffed stegosaurus, looking brave and very small. I cried at my laptop and wiped my eyes and wrote anyway. The community showed up, friends and coworkers and old classmates and people I barely knew. Gift cards slid into our mailbox with notes that just said "for coffee." The clinic staff made a meals calendar. Mom took it and ran. She built a Facebook page for Owen's Army and posted updates like she'd found her true calling. Pictures of him pale in a dinosaur gown. Pictures of him sleeping within 4 pole in the frame because drama has its own language. Then the line crossed. She posted a video of Owen on steroids crying, not understanding why he couldn't have another pudding cup, cheeks blotchy, hair matted with sweat, and she wrote, "He's fighting so hard, but this is the reality they don't show you. Please donate and share. Every dollar helps." I watched, my stomach lining burn. I messaged her. "Take it down," I said. "He's a person, not a story. People give when they feel something," she wrote back. "We can't be precious about this. This is life." I called. "He can't consent to you posting his worst moment," I said. "We made that page to update family. Not for this." She went cold. "Don't come at me like I'm the enemy," she said. "I'm trying to help my grandson. If you're too proud or too sensitive to do what's necessary, that's on you. Some of us had to grow up and do what's hard." "How is exploiting him helping?" I asked. My hands were shaking. In the hospital hallway, the nurse's station printer hummed, oblivious. "It's not exploitation, it's awareness," she said, like if she said the word enough, she could lacquer it over the truth. "And anyway, you sound ungrateful. Who got you that infusion pump when the hospital said you had to wait? Who spent hours on the phone with insurance? You don't get to police how I show my love." I hung up because if I didn't, I would say something I couldn't unsay. The next day, I took the page back. I changed passwords. I told her no more public posts of him. Period. She texted me 15 times, each more biting than the last, until the last was a cold, calm, "You can't stop me from telling my friends about my grandson." She couldn't stop, and she wouldn't. Maybe it was love in her language, but it didn't sound like care in mine. Love is face-to-face energy, and this was performance. The plan or the breaking point. I learned that when you're drowning, people appear with ropes you didn't know they had. The social worker at Akron Children's, Gina, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "We can talk about boundaries. You don't have to be the messenger for everyone. It's okay to be the gatekeeper when the gate leads to your kid." Jesse sat with me on the hospital cot and said, "We do this our way," and he meant he would stand with me in the doorway if I needed him to. But boundaries have to be enforced with something heavier than willpower. And my mom had always been good at slipping through the cracks, the loopholes of family and obligation, and the way people justify the behavior of the ones who share their faces. She started telling people she was organizing funds. She posted a Venmo handle and said donations would go straight to the family. She wrote, "No fees, all love." People sent her money, our friends, our coworkers, sweet church ladies, from their circles, not ours, who wrote "for gas" in the memo. Mom told me about some of them and sent me screenshots like trophies. I waited. I watched. I asked once, "Can you transfer the money to me? I'm tracking it all for taxes. It needs to be in one place." She made a wounded noise. "I'm not doing this for recognition, Maya." "I didn't say you were," I said. "It's tax season. Can we set up a dedicated account?" I'd set up an account already at Ohio Savings, a separate bucket to keep the hospital separate from the grocery store. The fundraiser money had been going there. She scoffed. "I'm not an idiot." And when I asked again, she told me I should be grateful someone else was willing to do the dirty work of asking, because she knew I was too proud to beg. Then a weird thing happened. A guy I barely knew from high school, Josh, messaged me, saying, "Did you get my $200? Your mom said you needed a new car seat for Owen because of the port positioning." We already had a car seat. I said, "Thank you so much. We did get the car seat comped by the hospital's safety program, so your donation probably went to gas." He wrote back, "It was supposed to go to the car seat." She made it sound urgent. My stomach did a quiet flip. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she had earmarked it and would send it. Then a former coworker messaged me, "I sent $150 to your mom's Venmo for groceries. Did you get it?" She said you were too exhausted to respond. It piled up, slow as snow, until you realize your car is buried. I went to Mom and asked calmly, "Can we do a transfer? Put all the funds together. It's cleaner." She smiled, sharp. "You don't trust me." I didn't answer. Some truths are too loud for words. She rolled her eyes. "Jesus, Maya, it's $75 here and there," she said. "Please don't say it like that," I said, and my voice cracked. "It's my kid." She went quiet in that dangerous way she does. "You watch your tone. I'm your mother. I have never done anything but carry you." Maddie, who was 15 and had spent the pandemic years learning how to depend on the internet for sanity, sent me screenshots later that night. Mom's private group, where people commented with hearts and prayers for Owen, I scrolled past the word like a speed bump. Mom wrote, "Gas is so expensive." Megan and I had to drive back and forth today so many times, which was funny because I had Jesse's car for the hospital days and Mom hadn't been there. She wrote, "We're getting a new TV for him. He deserves it," with a winky face that made my teeth itch. Maddie texted, "I'm sorry. I can keep my phone on silent during dinner and screen record when she talks." Is that crazy? Brave, I thought. The tiniest agent in the mess, slipping a voice recorder into a pocket because children know truth by the way the room goes colder or warmer. I went to legal aid. I sat with a lawyer named Ms. Alvarez, who wore sleek glasses and had a way of organizing papers that made you feel like maybe the world could still make sense. She listened, pen poised. "Is it criminal?" I asked. My voice was hoarse from hospital air. She tapped her pen. "Fundraiser fraud is tricky," she said. "When money is given to a person and not a nonprofit, it can be seen as a gift unless you can show clear intent that it was for a specific purpose, and that purpose was thwarted. That said, you can send a formal demand letter. You can document. And if she's also accessing your child's image and private health information to solicit money without your consent, we can file a cease and desist and, if necessary, a civil complaint." "Receipts?" I said under my breath. "Receipts," she said, and smiled for the first time. "Collect them. Dates, times, amounts. Screenshots. Bank statements. Keep your own spending log for Owen. It's tedious, but its power. So I started. It felt like sweeping the ocean with a broom, but it was something. I built a binder that I decorated with a picture of Owen Stegosaurus, because why not make it yours? I printed bank statements and highlighted the hospital charges. I added receipts for parking, for gas, for takeout on nights after chemo where my hands shook too much to cook. I added printouts of messages, people texting me, "We sent $, did you get it?" and "Can I bring supplies Wednesday?" I added the screen recordings from Maddie because, yeah, it's messy, but this whole thing was messy. I sent Mom a calm letter drafted with Ms. Alvarez's help. It outlined the fundraiser's purpose, requested that all funds be directed to the dedicated account, and asked her to remove posts that showed Owen in medical distress. It used words like boundaries and consent and unauthorized. It made me feel like I'd learned a new language. Mom showed up at our apartment at 9 p.m. with Mark at her side and an expression that made Jesse take a breath and plant himself 2 steps behind me. "You sent me a threat letter," she said, "not hello." "It's not a threat," I said, steady. "It's a boundary." She laughed ugly. "Look at you, Maya. Big girl words. Are you proud? You humiliated me." Her voice cracked, raw, and for a second, I saw the hurt under the blade. "I asked you to stop using Owen's worst moments to get money," I said. "I asked you to funnel donations where they need to go. I am not humiliating you. I'm protecting my kid." Mark looked at the door, then at his shoes. He had always been a man who chose silence and called it peace. "Do you think I would steal from my grandson?" Mom demanded. "Do you honestly think I would?" Maddie stood at the top of our apartment stairs, eavesdropping, and I didn't tell her to go. Jesse touched my back, an anchor. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say the thing that would keep the world intact. But I had a binder that said otherwise. "I think money makes people weird," was what came out. "And I think love and attention look the same to you sometimes, and it's not the same for me." "This is rich coming from you," she said. "You, who moved out and left me with your sister." "I left because you told me to get out," I said softly. She stared at me. "No one will take care of you like I have," she said, some final flourish of guilt. Then she left, slamming the door in a way that made the picture frame slant. We changed the fundraiser settings to friends only. We posted, "We're stepping back from public updates to protect Owen's privacy. Thank you to everyone who has helped." For those who asked, donations can still be made at account. Mom posted a furious rant about people who think they're better than family, which barely disguised who she meant. Friends took sides in the comments, a chorus of adults performing their roles in a play none of us had auditioned for. The spring Owen turned 3, Grandma got pneumonia. It came in quiet and set up shop like it had a lease. The antibiotics didn't do what they were supposed to. She got smaller, like the world was sucking the light out of her from the edges. I held her hand in her living room, the oxygen hissing, the television murmuring game shows no one watched anymore. "Mouse," she said, voice thin. "Promise me something." "I'm here," I whispered. "Don't build your house on quicksand just because it's where your family set up tents," she said. "Don't do the thing where you confuse history with home." "I won't," I said, and tried to believe myself. She went to the hospital again. Suma was kind, but kind can't always. We took turns sitting with her, me and Jesse and Maddie, who skipped a school dance and said, "They'll have more dances," which is the kind of thing we say when we're ready to give up on normal. Mom came, to her credit, with a fresh cardigan and magazines she'd never read. "We need to talk about the house," she said in the hallway in the voice she uses when she thinks she's doing business. Who gets it? What to do with the stuff? "Not now," I said, because grief makes you either brutal or soft, and I was trying very hard to choose soft for as long as it would let me. The day the hospital called me at 5:30 a.m., the sky was that bruised color that makes the world feel suspended. They said, "You should come," and I called Jesse and he grabbed his keys before I finished the sentence. We didn't run a red light, but we wanted to. It was quiet in her room except for the machine. Her breath was ragged. The nurse, Mary, was there, the same one from years ago, because the universe is small sometimes in such mercilessly kind ways. I told Grandma things. I told her about Owen learning to say Stegosaurus correctly finally, about how Maddie had dyed a streak in her hair purple and called it her superpower, about the time Jesse accidentally used dish soap in the dishwasher and the kitchen was a bubble rave. I thanked her for paying attention when no one else did. I said, I love you, because there are times you throw the words into the room and hope they cover everything you missed. She was here, and then she wasn't. Bodies are strange like that. The room went quiet in a way that made my brain feel 2 sizes too big for my skull. Mary touched my shoulder and handed me tissues like they could do anything. The funeral home was a place with soft carpet and louder silence. We picked a plain casket because Grandma would have hit us with a rolled-up magazine if we splurged on cushions. We made a photo board with pictures of her in a beehive haircut at 19, and in a grandpa sweater at 72, and with Owen on her lap smelling like baby shampoo and cookies. Family came we hadn't seen in years, and they hugged like long-lost guilt. At the service, no religion, just a playlist of her favorite songs and stories told like offerings. Mom stood at the sign-in table and smiled like the mayor. She collected cards. She accepted condolences like they were due. She put a hand on my waist for a photo and whispered, "Try not to look so puffy. You'll hate that later," and I stepped away without smiling. After we buried her, we went to her house, which smelled like coffee and dust and the last 10 years. People brought casserole and said unbelievable things like, "She looks like she's sleeping," even though she didn't anymore. We ate potato salad off paper plates because we needed something for our hands to do. Mom began with, "We need to talk about the will," like she'd been writing her cues into the program. Jessie set a pie on the counter with a thud. Maddie lined up cups like she was preparing for war. I took a breath. "We made an appointment with Ms. Alvarez," I said. "Grandma's attorney. She has the will." Mom's eyebrows shot up. "Since when?" "Since before Christmas," I said. Mom scoffed. "Of course," she said, like I had somehow rigged the calendar. The next Tuesday, Ms. Alvarez sat behind a dark desk and read the will in a voice that made it sound less like a trap and more like what it was, a woman making choices about her own life. The will left Grandma's house to me, to live in or sell, with the stipulation that I keep the maintenance up while Owen was in treatment and that I set aside a small trust for Maddie's education. It left Mom a cash amount that was less than she would expect, but enough to be polite. Mom went white then red. "She did this because you got in her ear," she said low. "No," Ms. Alvarez said, and the firmness in her voice made me want to put my head on her desk for a minute and sleep. "She did this because she trusted Maya to manage the house in a way that would keep a roof over her great-grandson's head during a medical crisis." I have notes from our meetings. She was clear. "I've always been the one here," Mom said. "I'm the oldest daughter. This is how it goes." "No, this is how it went before there were choices," Ms. Alvarez said, polite but unmovable. She made one. "We can go to probate, but from what I see here, there's nothing ambiguous." Mom's eyes flashed. "This is a con," she said. "You all took advantage of a dying woman." This was the moment. The reveal isn't always a curtain yanked back. Sometimes it's a binder slid across a desk. I took it from my tote. I placed it carefully. I opened it to the page with the fundraiser deposits and the messages and the sweet elderly neighbor's check we'd returned because we couldn't in good conscience accept her grocery money. I held the paper steady with my palm even though my hand shook. "This is every donation that went to my mom's accounts and every deposit that never showed up in Owen's fund," I said. "I'm not saying you intended harm. I'm saying harm was done." Ms. Alvarez put on her glasses. She looked at the highlighted amounts. She looked at the screen prints. She read a message where Mom told someone, "We're getting him a new TV because he deserves it," and the one where Mom told Mark's sister to hit up friends because stories like this go viral. This is our moment. The room went quieter than silence. "This is a misunderstanding," Mom said, but there was no weight in the words. I kept receipts. "Produce them," Ms. Alvarez said, crisp. "We'll reconcile." Mark stared at the baseboard molding like it had never been so fascinating. Maddie lifted her phone and said, voice small but steady, "I recorded when she told Aunt Meg that it wasn't like Owen would remember anyway." Her face crumpled on the last word. She reached for my hand, and I squeezed it like it was a lifeline, and maybe it was. Mom's face changed, half horror, half the fury of a person who thinks love entitles them to be above consequence. "You're a traitor," she said to Maddie, and something in me, something old and well-fed by fear, stood up and walked out of the room. "No," I said. She's a kid watching an adult do something and naming it. That's called being honest. You don't get to call people traitors because they won't keep your secrets. I'm saving my son. Ms. Alvarez slid a paper across the desk. Here's how this goes, she said. We can keep this within the family and reconcile the funds. You produce receipts within 10 business days. If they are missing, we treat unaccounted funds as debt to the estate for repayment. If you refuse, we file a claim. Separate from that, you will cease posting images or video of Owen without Maya's written consent. I have a letter here that formalizes that. Violate it, and we pursue an injunction. Mom looked like a person who had found herself on stage and didn't know their lines anymore. You, she said to me, voice shaking, you're killing me. No, Mom, I said softly. Funerals are rarely the end of anything besides bodies. The weeks after were a collage of casseroles I forgot to freeze and paperwork that ate time like a hungry animal. I went to Grandma's house every day. I walked her halls and talked to rooms. I sat on the brittle couch and cried until my face felt like I had a fever. I opened drawers like they could contain instructions. I found lists in her handwriting that said banal things, like toothpaste, foil, ask Maya about smoke detector batteries, and that one made me laugh and cry at the same time. Mom produced a handful of receipts. It amounted to about $500 worth of gift cards and a portable DVD player she swore was for Owen's hospital stays, unwrapped and unregistered, still in the trunk of her car. Ms. Alvarez was patient but firm. Where's the rest? She asked. Mom cried. She said, I'm so stressed. Financial tracking is not my gift. I only ever wanted to do good. She looked at me like I was supposed to absolve her, and my heart did that thing where it split and kept beating anyway. We filed a formal claim for the remainder and set up a payment plan that didn't ruin her but asked her to show up for once. It was $50 a week to the estate. It was symbolic and real, a way to say, what we do matters, even when the cash is still warm in your hand. She called to tell me I had embarrassed her. She texted that she hoped I was happy. She told Maddie she was moving to Mark's sister's for a while to think. Maddie texted me a heart and a wolf emoji. She stayed 2 nights a week with us for a month and learned how to make eggs the way Jessie likes them because her brain needed something easy. I did the things. We filed probate. We changed the locks because the neighbor had a key and the neighbor had a nephew who looked shifty. I set up a maintenance fund for the house like Grandma asked. I put aside what little extra there was because the roof had opinions. We got the gutters cleaned. We fixed the back steps. I went to Akron Children's and met with Owen's oncologist, Dr. Patel, and went over his maintenance phase like it was a roadmap. We taped schedules to the refrigerator and prayed to routine without using that word. Owen lost his hair and didn't care. He got moon face from steroids and learned to love dark bread and yogurt for reasons no one can explain. He learned that he could tell the nurses jokes and they would laugh even when the joke was not funny. He collected beads of courage and spelled his name across the dresser with them like a banner. One afternoon, after a lumbar puncture, he lay in his hospital bed with the TV playing a cartoon so bright it hurt, and he said, "Nana took my coins." "What coins?" I asked, distracted, cleaning up a spill. "My brave coins," he said, solemn, and held up the string with a missing segment. She said she wanted to show her friends. She took them and said she'd put them back, but she did not. "We'll get you more," I said, but the burn in my throat told me we were past replaceable. The smallest voices make truth sound like a bell. I called Mom. I said, "Bring them back." "You're overreacting," she said. "He didn't even know which ones were missing until you asked." "Why are you obsessed with punishing me?" "Because you keep taking from him," I said. "We're done." I blocked her, and it felt like jumping off a roof and discovering in midair that the ground is farther down than you thought. We got a custody agreement for ourselves sorted because the lawyer recommended it for clarity. If anything happened to Jessie or me, there would be outlines instead of chaos. We named guardians we trusted, a couple from Jessie's station, Sam and Dina, who make killer lasagna and tell stories about their dogs that sound like fairy tales. We added Maddie as an emergency contact for school and the daycare at the hospital. We added "do not post" to our rules like it was a line drawn in permanent marker. Mom found ways. She created a new profile and followed the hospital reporting tag. She posted a picture someone else had tagged me in and wrote, "My sweet fighter," and I sent Ms. Alvarez an email, and she drafted a stern letter and then a cease and desist. And when Mom ignored it, we filed, and a judge signed a very boring but beautiful piece of paper that said, in legal language, "Stop. Now." She called me sobbing. "Why do you hate me?" I sat in my car outside Akron Children's and watched a dad in the parking lot strap his kid into a booster seat, his hands careful as origami. "I don't," I said. "I just love him more than I love keeping you comfortable." The family split into predictable factions. Mark held on to his neutrality like a life vest. Aunt Meg called me a bitter, selfish girl. Uncle Rob sent me a text that said, "I'm proud of you," which made me cry in the grocery store by the frozen peas. Maddie sat on my couch and said, "Did I ruin everything?" And I held her face and said, "No, baby, you told the truth." There were days I missed my mother so much I thought my chest would cave. There were days I hated her so purely it scared me. There were days I forgot to feel anything at all, and then I would drop a spoon and cry like it was the lever that made the whole machine of my life spill broken parts. We packed up Grandma's house slowly. I made a keep pile and a donate pile and a ask Maddie pile and a no pile, which was everything that smelled like her. We found old postcards from Lake Erie and a box of love letters from a man who wasn't my grandfather and a ring I'd never seen before that fit me like it had been waiting. On the first day of spring, we spread Grandma's ashes in her backyard under the lilac bush she'd babied with coffee grounds. It felt like a Hallmark card cliché, but also just right. We said nice things about her hands and her patience, and the way she made room for us even when she was tired. I didn't invite Mom. This is the part people want tied up neatly. The judge ruled. The bad person learned a lesson and cried and apologized, and we all hugged in a warm kitchen with biscuits. But the truth is more knotted than that. We got the injunction. We got a payment plan. We got to keep the house, which looked better with a new front door and a painted porch and a wind chime that clattered less like grief. And also, we lost a version of family that, even in its hurt, was still something you could lean on occasionally for a memory of softness. I had to teach myself to build softness myself. I had to let other people show up and not feel like I owed them my life. Owen is 5 now. He has a scar on his chest he points to when he shows off like a superhero badge. He can tell you the steps of an engine because Jesse taught him and because he loves to understand the insides of things. He is in maintenance, pills every night, a clinic visit monthly, blood draws that he does with stoic eyes, and a squeeze of my fingers he no longer calls a squeeze, just an understanding. He had a class presentation in kindergarten about Hero Day, and the teacher emailed me, bless her, to ask if we were comfortable with him talking about the hospital. He stood in front of the class with his beads of courage and said, "These are for when I was brave," and he didn't mention the missing ones because his brain didn't hold on to that like mine did. He talked about Nurse Mary and Dr. Patel and the time he got to ride in a wagon down the hall that felt like a race car. He had a flourish at the end and said, "Also, my mommy is a hero," and I wanted to hide in the coat closet and cry in peace, but I didn't. I smiled at him from the tiny chair. Maddie graduated high school and got a scholarship to an art program with wolves, she said, grinning, and I sent her off with Grandma's ring on a chain and a trunk filled with kitchen stuff and a hug that smelled like our childhood home when it was good. She comes home twice a month to do laundry and draw at the kitchen table. She has a therapist she adores. Her laughter is easier. Mom is still Mom. She has a new job at a credit union and a new haircut and a tightness around the mouth that says she still rehearses the fight in her head. She sends me texts on holidays that say, "Thinking of you," with a picture from the internet. She once wrote, "He looks good. I'm glad he's okay," after I accidentally let a picture slip onto my public feed. I wrote back, "Thank you," because I refuse to let my heart turn all the way to stone. She's almost done with the payments. Ms. Alvarez says the judge appreciated our restraint. Sometimes I see Mom in the grocery store and we nod like neighbors. The beads we never got back live somewhere in a drawer I try not to imagine. I replace them slowly. With help from the hospital and with beads we made out of clay one rainy afternoon where we all ended up with streaks in our eyebrows, and Owen told me I was beautiful even with a smudge on my ear. I sleep at Grandma's house now. We sold our apartment above the hair salon and moved in between chemo cycles because the stairs were good for my thighs and because the house felt like a secret big enough for all of us. We painted the living room a color that looked like new leaves. Jesse built shelves in the kitchen that made the space somehow twice as big as it is. He proposed to me on the back steps with a ring I recognized and a speech that made me laugh through crying. And we got married in the backyard with the lilac bushes nodding and the neighbors' kids yelling down the block because life is always happening and you can either wait for it to be quiet or join the noise. I keep a folder in my desk labeled receipts. It has hospital bills and legal papers and the injunction. It also has this, a crayon drawing of a wolf curled around a mouse in a field of green. Maddie drew it for Owen for his 3rd birthday, and under it, in her blocky handwriting, she wrote, "Mouse has family." On Christmas, we eat pancakes and eggs and call the day what it is, a day. We invite the neighbor from 2 doors down whose kids are with their dad this year and the nurse who had a double shift but got an hour free and Jesse's captain who always brings a pan of baked ziti that looks like a science experiment and tastes like heaven. We say the names of people we miss out loud. We don't keep chairs empty because empty chairs are cruel. We make room. Sometimes, late at night when the dishes are stacked and the house hums the way it does when the day is done, I stand on the porch in my socks and listen. The wind chime is softer now. The street light flickers. Across the street, the neighbors put up those twinkling lights that make the whole block look like a promise. I think about the bus driver who caught my eyes in the mirror that night and didn't ask questions, just drove me to the place I needed to be. I think about the paramedic who called me by the wrong name, and then it didn't matter. I think about Grandma telling me I have a say, and about how sometimes the small voice is the one whispering from inside you, "Say it again. Say it louder. It matters." I wish I could tell you that, Mom, and I found our way back to a version of us that could sit at a table and talk about anything but money. I wish I could paint us healed and hand you the picture as proof that love triumphs in ways that don't require lawyers. But I also don't know that I want that, if it means folding myself back into a shape that propels her story instead of mine. I want a life where my son's worst moments are held, not broadcast. I want to walk into rooms that don't require me to pretend the floor I'm standing on is not quicksand. Last week, I found a folded paper tucked into a cookbook of Grandma's I hadn't opened in years. It was a recipe for molasses cookies written in her careful print. At the bottom, she'd written, "Mouse, remember, the recipe is a guide. Listen to your dough." I laughed, alone in the kitchen, and cried a little. It sounded like everything she tried to teach me, distilled into sugar and spice and stubbornness. The last picture of her on my phone is her holding Owen on her lap, his head in her neck, his hand on her cheek. The light is bad, and the framing is weird, and you can see a dust mote floating like a tiny planet. But it feels like proof, not of perfection, but of attention. Of someone choosing to show up. The night I left my mom's house, years ago now, I thought I was running. Standing on the porch of the house that smells like old books and paint, I know I was finding something. Not a perfect story. Not a happy ending stamped with glitter. Just the kind of life where you count your people not by blood alone, but by the way they hold your hand when the paramedic turns to go, and by how they look at your kid at his worst moments and see a person who deserves privacy and dignity and pancakes. The porch light is new now, a LED bulb that doesn't burn out as often. It hums a little before it gets bright. It always gets bright. What I learned. Boundaries don't have to be explained to the people who love you right. They can be firm and kind at the same time. If someone treats them like insults, that's information you can use. Family is not a pass for harm. Being a mother isn't a shield against accountability. It's a reason to be worth your kids' trust. Receipts matter. When your head is a tangle of love and fear and history, paper is sober. It lets you walk into rooms where your voice is shaking and still be heard. The smallest voices tell the clearest truth, little kids, teenage sisters, the part of you that whispers when the bigger voice is yelling. Listen to them. They save you. Legal help is not a betrayal, it's a tool. It's boring paperwork and signatures and dates that keep you safe when emotions try to bulldoze. Grief doesn't end just because you buried someone. Love doesn't either. Sometimes showing love is not letting someone keep doing what they've always done. Found family is not a consolation prize. It's a decision you make over and over. Invite the firefighter with the lasagna, the nurse who needs an hour off, your sister with the wolf pictures. Build your table. Hope isn't loud. It's a port flush without tears, a green paint that looks better in the morning, a porch light humming itself back to bright.